Hey everybody, it's Brandon from STEM Tutor Club, and today I wanted to make a video that's a little different than what I normally make. And this is about a podcast that I recently went on that I really enjoyed. So, this podcast is run by someone I know named Dave, who has created his own business called No Debt College. And this is really interesting. I had never even, I didn't even know this existed until he mentioned that he created a business around this. But basically, the idea is he created a training program with a lot of tutorials and a lot of kind of helpful information. And also there's a service component where he actually, he actually walks high school students through how to do this process. But basically the idea is that he teaches high school students to strategically apply for college scholarships to save tens of thousands of dollars potentially in um, student loans for when they go to college. And I think this is such a big deal because there's, a lot of people, probably most college students, I actually don't know the stats, but a lot of college students come out of college with, either tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And, wouldn't it be very helpful if you could put a dent in that or completely eliminate it? So that's what Dave's program is all about. And I think he has a lot of case studies on his site, if I remember correctly, about how he saved like tens of thousands of dollars in payments or in loan payments for multiple other students. And the way he actually got started in this, by the way, is with his son Sam. He actually realized that this could be a good business idea after he saved his own son tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, and basically other parents came to him and asked him how he did it, and that's how he realized that this was something that other people would find very valuable. So just looking through his site, this is a website right here. I'll be sure to post all this in the description, but you can talk to him directly if you're interested in this kind of thing. He also has a lot of other stuff going on. So here's his podcast that I went on. He also has kind of a blog and a Substack, but this is a program that he's created. This is for the summer, as of right now, summer of 2023. It's sort of like a boot camp program and a 2 month or 8 week boot camp program, basically preparing students to apply for scholarships over the summer and seeing what kind of scholarships they can get before the end of the school year. And you can see the kind of things that he's going over in this boot camp. It's all very interesting. It's basically every little component of what it takes to write a good scholarship. And you can see that they're every week your student would be studying certain things to prepare the best scholarships possible. Now, I don't think you can enter this program anymore because I started off in mid June. And as of the recording date for this video, it is the end of June. So I don't think you can enter the program that way. But I think if you use this link, which I'll be sure to post in the description, use you can still at least use the materials even if you aren't part of the boot camp itself. So this is a very kind of interesting tool, and it's for $97. I also have a discounted link if you're interested in something like that. Some other things that he does. So he doesn't just explain the process of how to do it, but he also gives you every day. He sort of gives on his blog or his Substack. He creates actual recommendations. So, for example, this a couple days ago he created a post for this scholarship. So these posts are generally very short and to the point, and you can see that he's basically just telling you that here's a scholarship that he's found. He's always researching these scholarships around the clock, and he basically says he gives you the details for what you need to do to apply, and then you can subscribe to this, and basically instead of trying to scour the internet yourself and looking through all the scholarships that you could apply for, you could just have those hand delivered to you easily and just kind of pick the ones you want to subscribe or want to apply to and not. So overall, it's a really good service. If you're again, if you have a little bit of work ethic, you could it would be like the equivalent of getting a multiple hundred of dollars per hour job, in my opinion. So if you can work 50 hours and get a couple $1,000s in scholarships for college, well, you just made a lot of money per hour. Let's put it that way. So this is overall a really good program. I really like it. And the reason I'm mentioning this, by the way, is because I recently went on his podcast to talk about my own business, STEM Tutor Club, and the different kind of things that I'm trying to pivot with, and the different kind of services and offerings I'm trying to introduce. So We talked about that on his podcast. And without further ado, here is the podcast episode with Dave, the scholarship coach.
This is Dave, the scholarship coach, with your daily scholarship for Saturday, June 17th, 2023. Today, I am joined by a special guest, Brandon Taylor, whose website is stemtutorclub.com. Brandon, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Dave, thanks for having me.
Well, you and I know each other kind of outside of this scholarship and education world, but I was very intrigued at some of the things that you are doing with your tutoring business. So I wanted to have you on, just talking a little bit about tutoring in general, and then maybe explain your kind of different approach to tutoring, in addition to the normal traditional online tutoring services as well. So if you could just introduce yourself to the audience and let us know who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name's Brandon. I went to school for computer engineering. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2019. I was in the software field for a couple years, but slowly but surely, I was sort of kind of drawn to education. Even when I was in college, I don't know, I just always felt like I had a knack for kind of explaining the engineering concepts that were um, that we were sort of going over like in college, explaining it to my friends and whatnot. So I feel like I always had a kind of a knack for that, and I always felt like I was good at that. And I sort of eventually, I kind of got the itch to start my own business, and I I basically kind of stumbled on some advice that basically do what feels easy, because it'll basically because it will allow you to put in the hard work, you know, much more than somebody who doesn't necessarily enjoy what they're doing or feel like it's easy to them. And as I was kind of thinking through my life, I kind of stumbled on that. So basically, for the last year or so, I guess I started about a year ago, almost on the dot. I think it was like basically early June 2022. I started kind of my math, or I guess my what I call my STEM tutoring business. So that focuses on obviously science, technology, engineering, math, but it's mainly math. I have several engineering students, but it's mostly math, focusing on a high school level and maybe an early college level, and that's basically what I've been doing the last year or so, among other things.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, like I said, we know each other outside of this world, and one of the things that, or one of the ways we know each other, is that my son needed some help with calculus, and so you gave him some advice. So we appreciate that. You said you work with high school and kind of early college. Can you tell us, like, specifically, especially for math, what subjects would that be?
All high school math. So in the U.S. or based, or most, or I guess most countries, but most of my students are U.S. based. Any high school math, I market myself as an expert in. If you come to me, I should know 100% of your questions. I should be able to answer all of your questions in as much detail as you want. And if I can't, my guarantee is that basically I'll create a video explanation by the end of the day, um, that I can get to you when you need it, basically. So basically, I stand behind all high school math, and where in terms of college math, I consider myself an expert up to, I guess, let's see, Calc 1 and Calc 2, but
Okay.
Calc 3 I am not. So that's basically my cutoff. Math obviously goes a lot higher in college, so like you get to Calc 3, then you get to differential equations, then linear algebra stuff, that sort of stuff. Which is pretty typical in any kind of engineering curriculum. But my cutoff, I guess, is at Calc 2. Anything below Calc 2, I consider myself an expert.
Cool. Great. Okay. Good. Well, before we started recording, we were just talking a little bit about your website and your kind of different approach to tutoring. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know that you do kind of the standard, FaceTime type tutoring one-off, but you're taking a different approach, which I found really interesting.
Yeah. So basically, and this sort of comes from my experience, I guess, over the last year or so. So over the last year, I've worked with kind of many students, a lot of most of them long term, and I feel like I've done a good job to like kind of always be able to explain the questions that they had in as much detail as they wanted, and like basically get them, always make sure that they understood the material. But what I sort of started to notice is that even though I feel like I was providing the same service, and like I was explaining things basically as well as I possibly could with tutoring, basically different students were getting different results. So like some students, like I guess honestly, some of my best students, um, they're kind of top, I would say top maybe 5 or 1% students. They're very very good at math. They're not coming to me because because they're bad at math. Kind of the opposite. They're really good at math, and they're just in extremely difficult classes, extremely
Hmm.
competitive classes. And I always feel like I've always felt that I've kind of given them everything they needed, and they've always kind of done very well and gotten great results. Basically, gotten A's in all their classes, in most of their tests, most of their assignments, that sort of thing. But with some of my other students, I feel like um, I have been sort of trying to I've been basically doing the same thing, but they haven't gotten as great results. And I've been trying to think about sort of the common denominator between them, or the difference between them, I guess. Why, what could explain the different results. And basically what I've settled on, and in hindsight, this made perfect sense to me, but basically what I've settled on is that what you do outside of tutoring is just as important, if not more important, than what you do, in a tutoring session. So I think a lot of parents, and I kind of had this idea, I guess, even before I started my business, that they have this kind of idea that tutoring is a panacea. So like
Hmm.
if you just find a tutor for 1 or 2 hours a week, and your student goes for 1 or 2 hours a week, and problem solved, they'll get an A in the class, or at least a B or high grades. That is not the case, generally speaking. In my experience, how the student works outside of class is more important than the tutoring. So like, what are their study habits? Are they completing the assignments? How are they reviewing? Are they reviewing the day before the test, which is bad, which is what most people do, me included, when I was in school?
Hmm.
Or are they kind of planning out like bite-sized, every day, kind of continually polishing their knowledge? Because in one of the main things that I kind of noticed is that you know learning is ultimately remembering. Now with math, there's a lot of logic involved, which is why I think math is oftentimes actually easier to learn once you kind of get the hang of it, because it's a lot of repeating the same logic over and over. It's not remembering a
Hmm.
bunch of facts necessarily, like
Right.
with history, for example. But the problem is that, or because of that, one of the main benefits is that you do still have to cram a lot of information in your head, and that really, you need to do that with the technique that I actually use to kind of prepare um for my tutoring business, is kind of a technique called spaced repetition, which is used in language learning a lot. It's been used in language learning for decades. Like all these language learning apps that you use, like that they basically all have kind of software algorithms behind the scenes. And they basically the way it works is it's like digital flashcards, with you have the front of the card, which is the question, the back of the card, which is the answer. And then you can, on the front of the card, the idea is that you look at it. So like it would be, in the language learning context, it would be like, um for example, the word, if you're trying to learn Spanish, they would show you the Spanish word, and then you'd have to guess in advance what that is in English, for example. And then if you get it right, you click one button. If you get it wrong, you click another button. And based on which button you click, the algorithm determines how much to wait before it shows you again. So if you get it right, then it basically doubles the amount of time before you see it again, loosely speaking. So you might start off, it'll show you the next day. If you get it right again, then 2 days from now, get it right again, maybe a week from now, then 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. Eventually you get to the point where you only see the card every year, because it's basically locked into your
Hmm.
long-term memory at that point. Whereas if you
Right.
get it wrong once, then you go back to the beginning. And if you think about that, that's basically kind of a clever software algorithm to basically practice only make sure you're basically putting 100% of your effort towards the things that you're bad at currently, which is how you're going
Right.
to learn them. And then once you kind of remember more things, the amount of work you have to put in tapers off. That's how your memory actually works, by the way. Like, I'm sure everybody listening to this has noticed that they only remember things that they see or hear over and over. That's how the
Right.
human brain is designed. That's a feature, not a bug. You're supposed to forget most of the things that you see, and basically, we kind of over. So that's kind of the idea. And basically, when I was preparing for my tutoring business, because during school, basically all I had to do was prepare for the test that I have this week. That's it. Whereas what I have to do now is I have to be an expert in 8 subjects at the same time. So I basically have to know everything for every, or almost everything, for every subject all the time, which what I found was a lot harder than basically just kind of preparing for tests when I was in school, even though the material might have been tougher in college, for example. Um, so basically, I kind of tested this idea on myself before I started my tutoring business, which is how I got to the point where I felt comfortable actually consider calling myself an expert in these subjects. And basically, what I tested is that it works for math too. So it's traditionally been used in language learning. I tested it for math problems. So basically, you go online, find a bunch of math problems, and like there are many different math problems they're different types of problems essentially. And then I would basically get one example for each, and then every day with my software as I was learning, I would see the problem, I would work it out on pen and paper. I went through like 3 notebooks probably in the course of a couple months just using it as scratch paper, but basically work it out 100% on my own, and then basically check the answer at the end. And then if I get it right, I click right, and the amount of time before I see it again in the software doubles. If I get it wrong, it goes back to the beginning, and it's a lot of work at the beginning, but the work tapers off. So like nowadays,
Right.
I basically put in no effort, whereas a year ago I was putting in most of my effort on that. So it's kind of like a long-term idea, and I'm really just trying to explore kind of bringing that to learning, because I think that is fundamentally different. That is how you learn. Like that is how you systematically kind of study in the most efficient way, kind of in the year 2023, with all the technology that we have. And all this is automatic, by the way. The software does it automatically. You just show up every day, click a button, and you look at these flashcards, do these problems. That's it.
Gotcha.
And then the software kind of does all the kind of heavy lifting for the algorithms behind the scenes. Like the way you would have done it in the old days is if you get it right, you put it at the bottom of the deck. If you get it wrong, you put it like towards the top of the deck.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? But the algorithms basically handle that now. So,
Yeah.
and then in addition to that, I also want to kind of venture into providing kind of what I would consider like full service tutoring. So yeah, we would have our lesson, which is important. It's critical, I would say, like once or maybe even twice a week. But I also want to do a lot more. So like I want parents to basically be able to set it and forget it. So they basically just say, okay, and really solve the problem, like kind of like they think that tutoring should, basically. So like if your student gets an assignment, I want us to have like a group chat where every time your student gets an assignment or a test, they kind of get in the habit of just taking a screenshot, uploading it, so I can see exactly what they're seeing. And then I can say, okay, we need to create flashcards for this, and that. And then they have the flashcards automatically next time they log in. We don't have to kind of email back and forth, all this hassle. And then like, easy scheduling whenever they need extra lessons, just kind of make everything automatic. Another thing I market is that for like every time we go through a lesson and we take notes, that's basically saved and stored. It's basically saved in like online software. So like students could go, if they could say, oh, what did we study on this date? They could just click into that folder and they could see exactly what we talked about on that date. So just kind of giving everything that a student would need to succeed in school. Basically make sure all the assignments are handled, make sure they're studying, ideally every day or at least every weekday, not just waiting till the night before the test, because cramming does not work, to put it bluntly. So that's I don't know, that's kind of a shotgun approach. I just said a lot of things, but I'm trying to, and a lot of this is experimentation too, by the way. I'm certain that it works with me, because it did work with me. Like I didn't know all this. I wouldn't have been able to tutor in what I'm tutoring now a year ago, and now I can.
Right.
It's all that information is lodged in my head now, whereas it was not before. And the spaced repetition was a big part of that. I would say it's actually the main part of it. So I know it works with me, but I'm kind of starting to venture or experiment with some of my current students, and hopefully kind of work out a beta program so that I can really hone this for other students and basically guarantee that they get the results that they want, as opposed to it being more of a kind of, oh yeah, you go to tutoring once a week, the tutor explains things well, as like there are a lot of great tutors out there, but are they going to guarantee that your student gets an A on the test? I want to work towards that. That's basically where I'm going now.
That's great. I take a very similar approach with scholarships. It's the bite-sized chunks, and it's working on scholarships very regularly. I think those are 2 key components to having success with scholarships. And just like you said, with really learning anything, there's a learning curve to knowing how to apply for scholarships successfully. And it's a lot of work in the beginning, and then it tapers off. It just becomes so simple once you know how to do it. But you got to put in that work in the front. So yeah, very similar approach that I use. So I mentioned your website, stemtutorclub.com. Obviously, people can go there to learn more about you and your services, but you also have the ability for folks to schedule a free session with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how people would do that?
Yeah, basically, if you go to if you go to the site, STEM Tutor Club, so throughout that, I sort of had, it's sort of a page where I kind of explain what I basically just explained verbally,
Mhm.
in terms of what I'm trying to do with my new service. But if you don't think you need that, if you're interested in just kind of, weekly tutoring sessions as needed, you can click the Calendly link, and if you use that Calendly link, that's on that web page, then it'll automatically schedule a 30-minute meeting, I guess, information meeting, and I can talk with you and answer any questions that you have, see if I think I could help, and we can kind of work out whatever you think you need. If it's and I have a lot of students who do this, by the way, who honestly, they don't need the full service. They just need to meet occasionally,
Mhm.
when I have openings. And basically, I just have a Calendly link that I give to people, and they can schedule a lesson when with whatever is open on my calendar. They can always schedule a lesson, and it's all automated, all streamlined. So you'll get email reminders. It'll automatically show up on my calendar, and then we can just show up and talk about whatever you want, and go over whatever you want for your lesson. So that's also an option as well.
Great, very good. Well, Brandon, again, thank you so much for coming on. Anything else, any last bit of advice or information you'd want the audience to know before we sign off?
No, I mean, overall, I really like what you're doing as well. Like, I wouldn't even thought about that as an idea until I heard that you were doing that. But that's really great, because I know that, like, I don't know, I feel like our markets overlap a lot. So there's a lot of, like,
Yeah,
the people who, there are two kind of gigantic problems, I guess, that a lot of a lot of families have once their students kind of get, towards the high school age. Like, one is getting through high school, and two is getting through college without going broke. So I think,
yep.
so I like that you have a kind of a similar approach, and kind of are looking to help the same people that I am. So I think that's very cool. But yeah,
Yeah,
overall,
yep,
I
absolutely.
appreciate being on the podcast.
Okay, there you have it. My conversation with Brandon Taylor of STEM Tutor Club. Be sure to tune in tomorrow when we'll talk about another scholarship opportunity. See you then.